Welcome to episode 95 of the Breaking Balls podcast, post-Southern 500. Another surprise winner this week. Congratulations, Chase Briscoe. You punched your ticket to the NASCAR playoffs. And Tyler Reddick, congratulations. You won the regular season. Just don't ask him what that smell is coming out of his car.
My God, I thought that Ty Gibbs chocolate milk a few weeks ago was rough. That was disgusting there. But yes, Darlington this weekend. I'm going to ask the question, should Chris Buescher be suspended for that door on Todd Gilliland?
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
Well, Bob, we can exhale because there was a lot going on. Crown jewel race for NASCAR at Darlington today. Playoff implications, a cutoff race. Where do you even want to start, my friend?
I think first, exhale, everyone, even you, our listeners. Yes, you listening. If you're new here to the Breaking Balls channel, first of all, welcome in. We're always talking racing, so hit that like and subscribe button. But yes, for our viewers, go ahead and just pat yourself on the back. You made it through a NASCAR regular season in full. We did it. We did it. It wasn't Daytona finale. It was a little weird with Darlington, but it was kind of nice, something different with the Southern 500. Eric Jones was the guy I always thought that, hey, if the Southern 500 was the last race in, he has a really good chance to be the dark horse. But no, Stewart-Haas Racing gets one last little victory before they go into the void of NASCAR abyss. I guess we'll start with Chase Briscoe, though. That was a really good win for the 14 team, huh?
Massive. I mean, you mentioned it, the 323 employees that are at Stewart-Haas Racing live on. They have something to fight for. They've got a playoff driver in Chase Briscoe, and my goodness, the talent that it took to get into this position from Chase Briscoe. I mean, he kept himself in the race, and then ultimately the move in stage 3 to get himself the lead and never look back. I mean, it was maybe one of the best racing moves we've seen all year.
You're 100% right on there with Chase Briscoe. That is his moment there. If I don't make this spot right here and take the lead here with my aggressive spot and new tires, I'm not going to have a chance for that track position there. I'm not going to be able to get myself in the playoffs. This is a win or bust here. If I wreck out, whatever. I'm not making the playoffs anywhere there. I guess it really jumped out to me. That move reminded me of so many moves that Chase Briscoe's had in the past that have gone wrong. I think of Kyle Larson in the Coke 600, Tyler Reddick in the Bristol Dirt Race. I know he slammed Denny Hamlin in the Indy Roval a couple of years ago as well. This was a moment for Chase Briscoe where he said, I'm going to make this move stick, and I'm going to have the talent to make it work and take the lead, not wreck out doing it there. It was the difference there. It was not by a lot, but he had the moment to say, hey, I'm going for the win. I'm going to be aggressive. If I don't get it, whatever. But he had the wherewithal to make it stick there with Ross Chastain on the top and then Kyle Larson there in between. That was just a heck of a move.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned it because I had a little bit of deja vu watching Chase Briscoe go low into the corner with 1 to 2 guys up, on top of him there. I thought he was going to slide up. Credit to him for making it stick and ultimately sticking his way into the playoffs. We've got another surprise winner, the second in 2 weeks, obviously. This one's a little less controversial as the Harrison Burton one because at least Chase Briscoe was, approaching the cut line. So I guess there's a little less controversy.
Then Parker Retzlaff isn't involved. So for Parker, he gets to take a sigh of relief to be out of the headlines for this week. God bless Parker. We're not even going to get into that, but give him a break, Chevy and RCR. Give him a break. But yes, and we didn't even mention the part that Chase Briscoe, he got to the lead there right before a couple of cautions and that restart happened. But then ultimately, he led the last 17 laps where he had Kyle Busch in his rearview mirror at Darlington. Really just throwback to the 2020 Xfinity race, which we saw a couple times on the broadcast there where he held him off on that last lap. But, he had to hold off Kyle Busch for 17 laps. Kyle Busch was in the exact same position as Chase Briscoe. I have to win or else I'm not in. The last few weeks, I think second, and fourth in the last 3 races for Kyle Busch. So it's a team that has had speed, but just not enough there. And for Chase Briscoe, it wasn't like this was a fluke overtime restart win or, somebody ran out of gas like Austin Cindric with Blaney there. No, Chase Briscoe had to wheel his way to the lead there late and then had to hold that lead late.
100%. And, the dirt background came in handy because he was on edge the entire time. He was having to, steer the heck out of the car, counter steer. He was sideways at times. He got into the wall a few times in the last few laps there. But ultimately, he crossed the took the checkered flag first, and He's punched his ticket to the playoffs. He just deserves a ton of credit. And honestly, the team as a whole, to not lose confidence in Chase Briscoe going into this week, to give him a car that he needed to basically put him in this position to punch his ticket to the playoffs. It's just a complete team effort. They absolutely earned this. And, it's fun. I think, the last week, the cutoff race being Darlington, 500 miles. I'll tell you what, I'm exhausted after watching that race. I feel like I may have just ran 500 miles because of all the different things we had to keep track of in this race, but gotta tip your cap to Chase Briscoe. That was a heck of a move to put himself into the playoffs.
100%. You even mentioned how the team didn't quit on him. They asked the team and the crew chief on the interview there on NBC, what, you guys didn't quit on each other. How'd you make this happen? He said, I believed in this team. We looked at our data from last fall in the Southern 500 and then the spring Darlington race, and you looked at Stewart-Haas Racing. Josh Berry and Chase Briscoe were both running top 7 at the finishing order there last in the spring. So this isn't a total shock to see an SHR car in victory lane. If you really think about it, I mean, they really do run well at Darlington. It's one of their best tracks as a team there. So they can keep whatever speed they had in the spring and move it on to the fall there. Are they going to be able to domino it into a playoff run there? I don't know. But, for Chase Briscoe there, it's his second career win, I believe, after I think it was Phoenix in 2022. He's had a lot of close calls, but this is a guy who has been touted as a highly touted prospect and has been in a tough situation with Stewart-Haas because it's supposedly a flagship car with Ford, but they haven't had the speed there. And obviously now he's moving on to Martin Truex Jr.'s car in the 19 seat next year. So he's going to have a lot of expectations. People are wondering, can Chase Briscoe handle that? I think today really shows a lot of people, hey, no, Chase Briscoe is that guy. He can handle this.
You hit the nail on the head. I was just going to mention how excited you have to be if you're at JGR and you know that you've got someone with that, that level of talent coming into the car, and just for him to be able to exhibit it just before he has to go and jump ship and, kind of get his feet under him in a new team and everything like that. This was just the race that we needed to remind ourselves what kind of driver Chase Briscoe is. So you got to give him a ton of credit for going in and punching his ticket. And ultimately, Bob, we've talked about the happy side of this, but there's a few guys who are leaving Darlington, South Carolina with a pit in their stomach. And
let's start with pit in the stomach. Let's start mid-race here. Let's talk about the guy that Chase Briscoe is actually going to fill in for next year, and that's Martin Truex Jr. Lap 3 at. All you have to do for Martin Truex, who's like 65 points to the good of the playoff cut line, all you got to do is just run a race. Just run a 20th place race. Doesn't matter. Maybe 1 or 2 stage points. Now, lap 3, he and Ryan Blaney just get into it. And Truex says, it's my fault. I'm an idiot there. I ran out of talent there. And it was Truex's fault. He had Denny Hamlin under him there, but Truex just goes straight up into Blaney. A hard crash for both guys. But for Martin Truex Jr., oh man, he's the only guy from the playoff bubble that is walking away just, I'm okay. Excuse me, I'm okay. Him and Ty Gibbs are walking away fine, but Martin Truex Jr. is the one that had to sweat all race because he was literally outside the car without the fate in his hands there. I mean, I said this back a couple months ago, Ad. I know he made the playoffs, so it's not really fair to judge it yet, but I just am not convinced this 19 team is a championship winning team. There's just they always find a way to be snake bitten. They're not running on the same caliber as their Toyota teammates like Denny Hamlin, like Tyler Reddick, or Christopher Bell. I'm not in on this 19 team, but ironically enough, he was the one guy on the playoff bubble that actually had a good day.
It is wild to me because there was one person who I really wasn't thinking about. I was like, oh, okay, he'll just go around, like you said, just, slowly collect laps, get his way into the playoffs, hopefully get a little bit of momentum maybe. But lap 3 was simply not when I was expecting Martin Truex to crash out of this race. Certainly made his day a little bit more interesting for himself, but ultimately at the end of the day, he's in the playoffs, and that's all you can ask for. And, I guess go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Martin Truex Jr. and Ty Gibbs are the two guys that pointed their way in. And Ty Gibbs was the one who was getting passed by the leaders there with 3 to go because he cut a tire down after a late wreck where we'll get into it here in just a second, where a lot of the playoff cut line guys got caught up in. But the two guys that ended up pointing their way in were the guys that wrecked out tonight.
Yeah, and it's so funny because you have such a different feeling about the two guys that pointed in to the playoffs. Because like you said, Martin Truex Jr., it feels like no momentum. It feels like not really a contender. And ultimately, I look at Ty Gibbs and I say, my gosh, for him to run that consistently well in his second full-time season of the Cup Series, that's a huge accomplishment for a guy like him. It's got to give him a ton of confidence moving forward that that win is coming. We say it a lot. If you put yourself in the front of races and you put yourself in positions to win, your win will come. And it feels like that's where Ty Gibbs is at this point. Ultimately, he gives himself enough points to get himself in the playoffs. Second year in Cup, I think that's a huge accomplishment for him.
It's funny you say that, though, where if you put yourself in position, that win will come, because you look at the rest of the guys we're going to look at on the playoff bubble here. Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, and Chris Buescher, all guys who ended up missing the playoffs tonight. And the guy that really jumps out to me, is Chris Buescher. Because you have the Darlington race where he gets, Tyler Reddick and all that. But then he has the Kansas race with Kyle Larson, where he's literally the closest runner-up in NASCAR history. Chris Buescher put himself in so many positions to win this year, but unfortunately, I think we even had a video earlier on the channel this year where the Fords, especially on the horsepower side, the Fords were just lacking to start that first 8 weeks or so of the season. And we had Ty Gibbs as a championship favorite early on the season. And now, did he have a summer slump? Yes. But the Fords really turned it on in the summer, but it was just too little too late. Chris Buescher had to dig himself out and win one of those races, didn't win a race, and found himself in a position like Kyle Busch, where Kyle Busch was even in his interview saying, I had Atlanta, I had X race, I had Y race. You can put yourself in position, but until you take that checkered flag, man, it's tough, because we're going to look at guys like Bubba Wallace, through no fault of his own this last month, really was running hot. But just incidents took him out, and it's a shame to see some of these faster cars get knocked out of the playoffs, just because by happenstance some of the winners this year were guys that just lucked into their way.
Yep, and I think the biggest lesson that both of the guys that we've mentioned here with Bubba Wallace and Chris Buescher is a win in week 1 counts just the same as a win in week 24, 25, 26, and neither one of these guys had a very good start to the season, obviously for different reasons. Ford, it's been pretty well documented on this channel. Bubba, for whatever reason, just could not find his groove earlier in the season. And, ultimately, the points you need to make the playoffs are everywhere, and it starts from the very moment that we get going at Daytona. It just feels like, for whatever reason, the early season woes of both of these guys have come back to bite them, and ultimately they're going to miss the playoffs. I think hungry dogs run faster, so it'll be interesting to see where both of these guys end up. And, I think both of them are going to be around the playoff picture for years to come. But ultimately this year, they both come up just a little bit short.
It's tough for Ross Chastain, especially because he sees his teammate Daniel Suarez, who has really not run great this year, but he locked himself in week 2 with that Atlanta win, with that 3-headed monster finish there over Ryan Blaney and Kyle Busch, who was against bridesmaid once again. Daniel Suarez is the one going to the playoffs for Trackhouse. And I think if you had said that in the beginning of the season, that one of the Trackhouse drivers is going to the playoffs, it's Daniel Suarez, everyone would have just said, okay, this channel is spam. We're going to report it. We're going to block it. We're going to delete it from YouTube, get it out of the world forever. But no, Daniel Suarez is the guy from Trackhouse in the playoffs representing them. It's wild to see how the season unfolds, because, over 26 races, no contest. Ross Chastain is the faster car, but, Daniel Suarez was the one that got in there. Bubba Wallace had the pole speed, but, gets rear-ended by Noah Gragson, and then also had the front-end nose damage on that big wreck there, where I think we're going to blame Josh Berry for that. I'm going to go ahead and blame Josh Berry for that. Hendersonville, that one's on us. We're going to go ahead and just take that one on the chin there. And Chris Buescher, we said it a second ago, but he just has had so much potential, just not able to get there, But I think the way NBC covered the playoff bubble today was very, very interesting, because this is a crown jewel race. You want to let it breathe on its own. You want to give it the history and respect to have it. You don't want to say elevate above races, but kind of elevate above races. There's 4 races that are crown jewels. You got to treat them like that. And I think NBC did a good job of balancing, the quad boxes. You have the Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher battle in stage 2. I thought that was fantastic TV as a viewer, as a NASCAR fan, and probably as a non-NASCAR fan. I think somebody can get into that. I just thought NBC handled everything perfect today.
I agree with you 1,000%. I watched that part of, I was watching this part of the race with my wife, who is by no means a NASCAR fan, but was getting into it and asking questions just because of how the coverage was done of that last part of the race. I thought, like you said, the bubble coverage with Buescher and Bubba was awesome, to kind of see them and to really get a firm understanding of what each driver needed to do to get into the playoff. And then I'm just going to say this, you can inject the coverage of the last 15 or so laps where they had Kyle Busch's in-car camera just looking at Chase Briscoe directly into my veins. That is exactly what I want as a NASCAR fan. It was awesome to just have that focus on saying, look, one of these two guys is going to race their way into the playoffs right now. I'm going to let the moment breathe, and you guys are going to get to see who it's going to be. I thought it was just very well done at the end there.
You became one with the car, and no other cars were on the track. It was two cars you were watching. You were Kyle Busch's car for those last 5 or 6 laps. They zoomed in until I think 3 to go. They cut it back there. But yeah, I agree with you. They let the moment breathe there. It's just so much more professional than our friends on the first part of the season calendar, Boyer and the boys in the booth there. Again, the pre-race show, just the way they, covered Harrison Burton and the lead up and the playoff bubble and the history of Darlington, the county, the Southern 500 itself. I just, this is Lee Diffie's first Southern 500. He said this is the first time he's at Darlington. Why is this place special? And by the halfway point of the race, you could tell he was like, okay, I get it. This place is just iconic NASCAR. It is just really the quintessential old school NASCAR meets futuristic present day NASCAR. You've got the next gen car with the beating and banging. It's physical. It can take those Darlington stripes, Ad. I mean, you saw Briscoe on the lap with 3 to go hit the wall. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's just, Darlington is probably, when you think of it NASCAR, it is NASCAR.
I agree with you 1,000%. And just the way that the broadcast was able to be nostalgic without it being really over the top. They did a good job of honoring the history of the track, making the viewer understand why this is a crown jewel race, why this is so important to the diehard NASCAR fans, and why this place is sold out every single time we come to race here. It was just it just gave the viewer a very unique understanding while also being able to focus on what was actually happening in the present day. And I think it was a perfect blending of the past and the present, and it really elevated the entire broadcast.
And it elevates the talent in the NASCAR field to the top there. You look at the guys that are running in the top order there. It's the guys that are the championship contenders. You saw Larson, Reddick, Hamlin at some point. It's guys that are really strong contenders. And, toward the end there, it was Briscoe, Kyle Busch. It did mix a little bit there. But this is really the track where it separates the guys that have good strategy and the guys that can wheel it and combine a perfect storm. Because this is, again, compared to the Coke 600, Coke 433 or whatever it was this year, Coke 466,
337,
something like that. It was a lot shorter than it needed to be. I still am upset about it. Clearly, Memorial Day was just, it still is a stick in my gut. But anyway, you look at the Coke 600. Yes, it's 600 miles there, but sometimes it's done in 4 hours. 4 hours. This is a 400-mile or 500-mile race. It's 100 miles less. But it's just a long race. It's a grueling race. It's physically a little bit more demanding. You saw the drivers sweating, heating, throwing up, doing other bodily fluids in the car. Tyler Reddick, we'll get into that at the end. Dear God, somebody check on that man. I don't want whoever has to clean that 45 car. Bonus points this year. Bonus of the week to you. But Ad, you look at just the overall strenuousness of this race and what it takes to win. It brings the best out there. And I think we might as well just jump into the results here. You look at the top 10, everything looks pretty according to plan. These are some of the stars of the Cup Series. Briscoe, yes, he's a great dirt track racer, can whip it. But Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Tyler Reddick, Corey LaJoie, all stars of the Cup Series that finished in the top 10. Whoa. Corey LaJoie in the top 10. First of all, Ad, this was Corey LaJoie's first ever non-drafting superspeedway top 10. What the hell happened?
I guess we got to call. First things first, let's clap it up for Corey LaJoie. That's, if you're gonna be out of a job, you may as well, on your way out, just really make sure the boss knows what they're missing out on. And I think that's what Corey LaJoie did here today. Found a way to survive his way through all of the wrecks and got himself finally a top 10 finish in the Southern 500. Can't take that away from him. I was wondering why, when you were talking about the stars of the sport, I was wondering why you skipped Corey LaJoie there. It didn't really make a ton of sense to me, but I
Comes
guess
back around.
Yeah, I guess it always comes back around. But honestly, you hit the nail on the head, Bob. If you look at this top 10, it's kind of a who's who of the sport at this point. I mean, Kyle Larson, a heck of a day. I think led over 260 laps. It was just one of those days where it looked like Kyle Larson was going to win another Southern 500.
Yeah, this is really timely. This is really timely. Corey LaJoie actually just tweeted a little bit ago. And for our friends that can't see the screen here, I'm just going to show you the tweet there. P9 Southern 500, and it's the meme there. That's fantastic. Corey LaJoie's at least leaning into it. Bravo to him. That's pretty good there. That's good timing there.
I was going to say a little. Corey LaJoie is at least self-aware of this whole thing, and having a good sense of humor about what's going on in his NASCAR career, I think, is going to save him a lot. Lord knows where he's going to end up driving next year, but it's stuff like that just makes him so lovable and really makes him a figure in our sport.
See, that's the thing, Ad. Like, there's moments where like I really don't like Corey LaJoie because he's the guy that I should be in a better car. I have a talent, but then he leans into that kind of a side with it. Listen, that's funny content right there. I don't care who you are.
I think if you and I know anything about life, dealing with things with a little bit of a sense of humor will get you a long way. And Corey LaJoie simply knows how to lean into things with a sense of humor sometimes, and it makes him endearing.
We did cover the top 10 that did feature Corey LaJoie, his first top 10 on a non-drafting super speedway oval. Once again, Corey LaJoie top 10 there. Chase Elliott just missed out on the top 10 and 11th there. Ryan Preece with a 12th place finish. Austin Cindric 13th there. The guys that are, mid-tier on the Ford level definitely showed up a little bit better today. Seems like Keselowski just didn't have the speed there in 14th at a track that he usually is pretty good at. I mean, he did, win there earlier in the season there in the spring. I thought he'd be a little faster there. Seems like they couldn't get it to go in here. Ad, who kind of jumps out to you? I think one other one that besides that is Eric Jones in 24th, a guy who has historically been dominant at this track, really is one of the dark horse favorites. Not anyone there, but I don't know. Who else did you were shocked by?
I mean, there's a gentleman that you mentioned in the intro that finished 17th, Todd Gilliland, who I thought, honestly, there were some points at this race where he was really strong. Obviously, there was a little bit of an incident there in the middle of the race that I'm sure you would love to touch on, my friend. So by all means, I'll dust that one off for you and give it to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Todd Gilliland and Chris Buescher incident in stage 3 because, we are always talking in NASCAR. Oh, he right rears him. That's a penalty. Suspend him. Nobody really was upset about Chris Buescher taking out Todd Gilliland there for, quote, door slamming him previously. So it seems like that was in retaliation there. I'm sure this is one of those that it'll kind of quietly grow when the SMT data potentially comes out there, but nobody seemed to be upset the fact that Chris Buescher completely wrecked Todd Gilliland in the wall in the backstretch, pretty much just rears him there. I mean, I don't know. Am I just being a little overprotective of the Todd father, Ad, or is there something to this?
I gotta say, I almost sent you this text message in the middle of the race and I deleted it. But I kind of agree with you, Bob, because ultimately, the incident was what it was. Todd kind of pushed Chris Buescher up the track a little bit. Chris Buescher's feeling the pressure of his playoff life at that point, and ultimately he decides to go, kind of cut down and puts Todd Gilliland into the wall. I mean, I don't need the SMT data to be able to look at the replay and see the wheels turning toward, and hooking Todd Gilliland. We've been, here's what I'll say about this whole thing. We have talked at length all year to this point about NASCAR officiating consistently. They have a chance to officiate consistently. I don't think you will see a more clear right hook, going into this part of the season. Going into the playoffs, I don't think you're going to see too many right hooks. This may be the last one we see this year. It will be interesting to see how NASCAR officiates it.
Oh, I don't know. I have a feeling somehow or another we'll see one. At least we forget that Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson's little Kansas incident was in the playoffs a few years ago. I hope you're right. I'm tired of hearing about these suspensions and all that. But again, when I saw that on the broadcast, and then I hear Buescher's reaction to it afterwards, how he door slammed me. I'm mad at him. And then just pretty much taking him out there. I get Buescher's in that playoff must-win mentality there. He's on the cutoff line there. Ultimately was null and void there with Briscoe winning anyway, but I didn't love that, especially when the narrative is that, Austin Dillon is a terrorist, Corey LaJoie is just a menace out there. Well, Chris Buescher's a fan favorite, but he did pretty much just take out Todd Gilliland. I don't know. We can't have it both ways, NASCAR community. If one right hook is a suspension, they all are, as far as I'm concerned, except for the Austin Cindric, Austin Dillon Gateway one last year. But anyway, that's just null and void. As far as the racing today, I thought it was pretty good, but there's one thing that kind of jumps out to me. And go ahead. Yes.
Move on, a Breaking Balls tradition, I would be remiss if we avoided this. Congratulations on finishing 21st, Harrison Burton. We are so proud of you as a podcast. Way to recover. We simply could not have moved on without it. I'm so sorry if you're a loyal Harrison Burton fan. You get that kind of coverage here for Breaking Balls. We will never let you down.
Well, normally I would be like, yeah, we weren't going to talk about it on the rest of the show, but we are going to do a just quick little playoff preview at the end, just that the playoffs are set. And Harrison Burton's in that playoff preview, which I can't get over still. He's last in the playoff or in the regular season points, but he's going to the playoffs. Anyway, no, Harrison Burton, yes, 21st, but we will be talking about him in the playoffs here shortly to come. But I just wanted to touch on this really quickly because we did kind of not clash on it, but you did have some rebuttal here. Darlington as the cutoff race for the regular season. Obviously, the Olympic breaks this year, very different than normal. Usually you have the Daytona cutoff race, and the Southern 500 on Labor Day weekend is the playoff opener. Everything got pushed up a week this year, so you have Darlington as the cutoff race, Atlanta as the playoff opener next week. Okay. We're doing super speedways to split the regular season finale. Anyway, I'm not upset about that at all. I love Darlington. I thought it was an incredible race today, but I love it as the playoff opener, and it just didn't feel right today as the cutoff race. I don't know. What you seem to disagree there.
I do. And I think the reason being is that for whatever reason, there is something about the conclusion of a regular season in sports and anything that has playoff implications. It just feels a little bit bigger. And ultimately, I think if you combine that feeling with Darlington, and having the Southern 500 and having it be a crown jewel race, it just creates an excitement that your fans are going to want to tune in and watch what's going to happen. And I don't know, there was something about this race that just felt more important to me. Well, it is more important than me, but also to me. It's one of those things where I don't know. There was a lot of a different feeling, even to when, you go to Darlington and it's a crown jewel and it's the Southern 500 and you kind of get excited about that. But there was something about this track that brings out the best in not only the drivers, but the teams as a whole. You need a complete effort if you were going to win at Darlington. And I think that's what makes it feel like an appropriate regular season finale for me, is because you don't get lucky at Darlington. You don't back into things in a 500-mile race. And I think that's what I like. It just feels like a nice, strong bookend to the regular season where you close the book and you say, okay, if you're in the playoffs, you have earned it to this point, and we move forward into whatever the heck is going to happen in the calamity of NASCAR playoffs. And there was something about it that I really liked.
That was a great speech. You're wrong. Listen, I agree 100% that it felt a lot more bigger today than anything. But when you have a crown jewel race, it's already a big event. Why add something else to it? And why can't you spread that event that status out the way? Daytona last week already felt like a big race, but it felt like the regular season ended right there, then and there, because for everyone else, I know Chase Briscoe did end up winning today and sneaking his way into the playoffs, but that's still a tier 1 Ford OEM team. I know it's an upset win, but it's not like that Harrison Burton win. And for the regular season to end at Daytona, it's like, okay, everyone always looks, we can circle the last race at Daytona. That's the lottery style last chance to throw everything at it. For the Southern 500 I'm with you. It makes the drivers earn it and all that. But I think that should be something the playoff drivers should have to earn. When this race opens the playoffs for the round of 16, you have 16 guys in there. This is such a long, grueling marathon of a race. Mechanical incidents can happen. You can get caught up in wrecks. You can get caught with pit road incidents. It's a full team effort that you saw today. But it really doesn't mean anything because, okay, what's the last race of the regular season? Now we're just completely scrapping it and starting over again. If you start this in the playoff beginning, I just feel like, okay, yes, you are looking forward to the playoff start, but you're also looking forward to the Southern 500. I think if you have Daytona at the end, which is, again, what the NASCAR schedule is going to be next year for 2025, they're going back to normal. This was just an Olympic thing that pushed everything out of the way. They do have Daytona as the finale race because it's a lottery style. And you have that Harrison Burton walk-off win. If Harrison Burton walks off and goes straight into the playoffs this week, he finishes 21st. That's actually not a bad result, all things considered, when you saw guys from the playoffs that would have had attrition issues. I just think that having Darlington in the playoffs just kind of opens things up for a little bit more mystery instead of, okay, now we're going to have Atlanta, which is just a lottery. You're going to have Watkins Glen, a road course, and then Bristol. It just, I like something a little bit more mixed than that.
I hear what you're saying, but ultimately, I think the number one complaint that we get, we hear a lot as NASCAR fans right now is that there aren't any stars in the sport. There's not any superstars, guys that really transcend what's going on. And I think an event like this, where you have so many things on the line and it's a crown jewel race, I think it just, like you said, why spread it? Why not just spread it out? I think my rebuttal to that would be because it makes it must watch, and it makes it something that you've got people who are going to watch this because it's a crown jewel, it's a Southern 500. You've got people who are tuning in because it's the end of the regular season. They want to see what's going on with what's going to end up happening. And I think when you combine those two things, it makes it just really high stakes, and it makes it feel a little bit different. And I think that's what I was kind of going with, and that was the feeling that I got, and I really liked it. I appreciated I appreciated this. That being said, it is nice to have Darlington in the playoffs. Atlanta being the first race of the playoffs feels massively uncomfortable, and you are right on that note of things.
There's a way to go about it. Atlanta opening the playoffs there, I just don't love, because that is truly, you have Daytona to finish it. That's a lottery. That's fun because, like I said, the regular season, okay, after that race, you stop everything, you reset. But now next week, Atlanta is the first race in a whole new season for 16 drivers. And yeah, we might as well jump into the playoffs here now because we're already here, Dad. We've got 16 guys still alive now for the playoffs. And yeah, we're starting in Atlanta. I mean, that is just really, you've got Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Bristol as your round of 16 races here. And you look at the playoffs. I sent you the bracket here. I'm pulling it up here. But you've got Kyle Larson still is the number one seed because of the absolute war chest of stage points and race wins he's built. And Christopher Bell is the second seed. But Tyler Reddick did end up winning that regular season title by 1 point over Kyle Larson. I bet he really wishes he would have started the Coke 600. But anyway, I guess just briefly here, what jumps out to you as far as this playoff grid? Anybody that jumps out that you think is in a ditch that they shouldn't be in, or anybody that's in a better position you thought that they might not be in?
I'll tell you this much. Looking at William Byron in fourth, it felt like William Byron has fallen off an absolute cliff for the past few months. He just hasn't been relevant, hasn't necessarily been running.
He has.
And that's the thing, is like, it's one of these things where it's like, of course he did enough early in the season, and was winning enough that he got it. He's fourth right now and he's in a really good spot, but my gosh, does it feel like the wheels have fallen off that 24 car. I'm just interested to see if they can get it turned around and see if he can get any momentum. And ultimately, like you said, Atlanta, not necessarily, anybody's strongest track. Nobody knows what the heck's going on. Watkins Glen, not necessarily a world-renowned road course racer. And then Bristol, which, ultimately he's had some success in the past, but it just feels like he's got to get things turned around pretty quickly if he wants to, continue to fight for his playoff life.
Yeah, no, I think especially with the way the playoffs shape out this year, there's so many, the parity is just, I mean, the margin for error is razor thin. And I think what jumps out to me is because we've had a lot more surprise winners, and you've had guys like Chastain, Wallace, Buescher get knocked out, those guys that were going to be higher in points. You have a lot of guys that have very little to zero stage wins on the year. And so you look at the cutoff line, and Alex Bowman is one to the good in the play, or technically he's the last man out. But really, last man is Martin Truex 1 point out. So, I mean, really, all the playoff guys are -0, -0, -1, -1. There's been nobody at the bottom of the field that has really stacked themselves into too deep of a hole. You see sometimes when the playoffs start, someone like a Michael McDowell or, a random winner will come in there and they'll be 14 points out or 20 points out just because they've got to, win there. But we've had a lot of guys like that this year. Ty Gibbs has speed, but hasn't had stage wins. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting because now more than ever, even a guy like Denny Hamlin, who has 3 wins on the year, is 10 points above the cut line. One Toyota engine blowing. That one Toyota engine blowing is all it takes, and he's out in the round of 16. And I know you're thinking, well, Bob, nobody's going to get knocked out that shouldn't. Okay, Joe Logano last year. was safe at Bristol, wrecked out early, was out. Just like that. Fate was out of his hands. Bubba Wallace pointed himself in. So, there is no margin for error this year.
No, I agree with you 100%. The one thing that actually, another thing that really jumps out at me looking at this, at this playoff grid, with all that we've done in the next gen era to ensure that there's parity and to ensure that everybody's got a chance when they go to the track, all 4 Hendrick drivers and all 4 JGR drivers are in the playoffs. And it just goes to show you that no matter how much we try to get parity in this sport, the big boys are going to be the big boys. And, ultimately, we were a little bit, we had to wait to see if Ty Gibbs and Martin Truex Jr. were going to get in. But ultimately, Hendrick brings their 4, JGR brings their 4. It's a tale as old as time, Bob.
Yep, and I believe Penske got all 3 in as well. So the 3 flagship OEM teams there really got all their cars in there, whether it was on points with the 2 Toyota drivers at JGR or the rest of the field winning in there. The rest of the field, some of those stronger teams like RFK 2311, they get one of their cars in. But, for Front Row Motorsports, they had 2 very fast cars all year, but it just was a matter of fact that there was only so many spots because you had guys like Daniel Suarez win so early on in the year. It really did kind of backlog the rest of the field and had them more desperate than ever there. And even Kyle Larson at one point was ineligible for the playoffs. So listen, there's a earth out there where Kyle Larson is still ineligible for the playoffs with 3 wins.
Is this the part of the playoff talk where we talk about the waiver? Is this waiver talk time?
Yeah, that's a great moment for me to bring up. Again, if you've made it this deep into the episode, thank you for watching. As always, we are talking NASCAR on a daily basis on this channel. Go ahead and like and subscribe for all the content. Again, the playoffs are next weekend with Atlanta. It was a great race. I'm not upset we're racing at Atlanta. And I don't want you or our viewers to think I'm upset we're at Atlanta. I just don't love we're racing at Atlanta in the playoffs for what it means. I'm excited. That race, the race this spring with the 3-headed finish, the 3-car finish, that was fantastic. But just shouldn't be a playoff race. I'm sorry.
It's a little bit too, it feels like a scratch-off lottery ticket. And, ultimately, does that belong in the playoffs? Probably not. I tend to agree with you that probably, there's no real room for just kind of getting lucky, especially when you're trying to decide your series champion. But ultimately, that's the cards that were dealt, and we'll have to figure it out. And, Bob, there's one thing that jumps out at me, and, it's been a topic of conversation for the past, in the NASCAR media for the past week. But seeing Harrison Burton in this playoff after being dead last in points in the regular season, I mean, what say you? Do we need to bring back I think it was it 25th or was it
30th?
It had to be
30th.
30th. There it was. I forgot the number. I'm, CTE, that's on me. But should we bring that rule back? Because it feels dirty seeing Harrison Burton's name above Ty Gibbs and Martin Truex Jr.
I mean, can I be honest here? What's the difference between 25th and 32nd in the Cup Series? I mean, yes, I get what you mean, but at some point or another, neither one of them is going to be, in theory, competitive. If you've won that race and you're a full-time driver, you've raced in every entry in the year, you've earned that. I know it sucks because it does, in theory, take away a deserving spot from someone like a Bubba Wallace, a Ross Chastain, a Chris Buescher. But Harrison Burton was the one that put himself in position to win one of those 26 races when those guys didn't. And no, I'm with you. I mean, it definitely is a hard pill to swallow that the guy who is last in points is in the playoffs. But, he had every opportunity the same as they did. And, Jeff's little boy did it. Unfortunately, the rest of the world may not like it, but Jeff's little boy did it. And Chris Buescher might not even be in the race next weekend if I have anything to say about it with NASCAR's sanctioning body. Because again, he took out Todd Gillen. That penalty should be coming, and Todd Gillen's somehow going to win at Atlanta when it doesn't matter because that's just how it rolls. But again, I just probably need to talk to somebody. I have a lot built up.
Well, we believe in Front Row Motorsports supremacy on this podcast if it hasn't been made abundantly clear to this point. But
this is
Bob,
very true.
Anything else as you look at the playoff bracket that jumps out at you before we put a bow on this thing and send the people on their week?
No, stay tuned to the channel. I'll probably have a video kind of detailing a little bit more of some of the dark horses in the round by round, who looks good this week. But no, I'm excited. We are in the money time as far as the playoffs. 26 races down, the regular season is behind us, and now every race genuinely matters. I know we always say every race matters, but now every race really does matter as far as the points wise for 16 guys and then 12 guys and then 8 guys and then only 4. But no, you get the idea. Anyway, take me home before I just completely take this off the rails.
No, I don't want to take you home country roads. College football is back, and that's something we're both excited about. Go Irish.
MIZ.